Or we're preparing what you call terms of reference, no? Gusto natin, kung ipaprivatize natin to, talagang yung gagawin ng private sector will conform to international standards. Walang naibigay na budget sa amin, no? Merong 1.2 billion, no, for contract service contracting, no? Pero napakaliit nun para ibigay natin dito sa EDSA busway, no? Kasi sa EDSA busway, we spend around 10 to 12 million a day.
From the nation's capital, all sides, all the time, I am Jess De Los Santos.
And I'm Danny Laurel. The big story tonight.
Free rides for the EDSA busway end this month and will no longer be extended due to budgetary constraints.
Instead, the government plans to privatize the busway's operations by next year to meet international standards. Gerard de la Peña with the big story.
The Transportation Department on Wednesday opened the Tramo station of the EDSA busway, making it the fourth station to become operational this year. So far, there are 21 EDSA busway stations from Monumento to Pitex in Parañaque. But Transportation Chief Jaime Bautista admitted that the facility is not up to par with global standards. That's why they are planning to privatize the busway by 2023.
Gusto natin, kung ipaprivatize natin to, talagang yung gagawin ng private sector will conform to international standards, no? Sigurado dapat yung mga pasahero natin hindi nababasa pag umuulan, hindi masyadong naiinitan kung mainit ang panahon, no? So siguro dapat maging komportable sila, no?
For now, commuters will have to brace themselves as free busway rides are set to end soon. Fares will be once again collected starting January 1 next year.
Walang naibigay na budget sa amin, no? Merong 1.2 billion, no, for contract service contracting, no? Pero napakaliit nun para ibigay natin dito sa EDSA busway, no? Kasi sa EDSA busway, we spend around 10 to 12 million a day.
This is a burden for commuters, especially those who take the EDSA busway on a daily basis.
Ang hirap, tapos magkano na naman pamasahe, uwi ko pa, Cavite pa ako everyday.
Mabigat po. Sayang din po yung pamasahe, pangkain na lang din yun eh.
Passenger volume at the EDSA busway reached up to 400,000 daily during the holiday rush. There were 750 buses, but this will have to be brought down to just 600 as passengers are expected to transfer to other modes of transport like the MRT once the Libreng Sakay expires. Meanwhile, to augment the supply of public transport amid increasing demand, the LTFRB has reinstated and modified over 100 jeepney routes in Metro Manila. For News 5, Gerard de la Peña, we are One News.
Let's talk more about the government's plan to privatize the EDSA busway with Ira Cruz, Director of Transport Advocacy Group Alt Mobility PH, joining us via Zoom. Ira, good evening. Welcome to the big story. First, what do you make of that statement from the government as though it would only take the private sector to actually make the EDSA busway at par with international standards? Is that even the route that we should be taking?
Well, first of all, it's good that at the very least, the government is recognizing its shortcomings and is starting to propose ways to really improve transportation. As I was mentioning to you off air, the last 5 days have been nothing but news about transportation from the DOTr delivering on a promise to prioritize pedestrians and cyclists in the next 6 years. Social media collecting on Senator Villar's promise to even decimating media personality, and then this. No? So I think it's a welcome development that finally the government is recognizing its shortcomings. In the statement of Secretary Bautista, is showing concern. And he's even mentioning that there's not enough budget allocated by Congress to address the issues, and if it takes the private sector to collaborate with government in finally addressing our transportation issues, then it's a welcome development. Okay. But I think it's very, very important for us to carefully unpack. What does it mean to promise this? What will it take for the government to to deliver on these promises? And what does this privatization mean? What is the plan of the government? What would be the responsibilities of the private companies? What would be the responsibilities of the government? And I'm mentioning that because while the private sector perhaps has a lot of capacity in terms of addressing shortcomings of the government, there are certain functions that only the government can deploy, such as allocating road space, prioritization of buses and public transportation on the road, and then the list goes on. And I hope that the study that they're starting would consider these.
Okay, maybe we can focus a bit more on that. No, what are the challenges here for the government that needs to be completely privatized or tackled by the private sector, and what should be left on the government's agenda and under their responsibility?
Right. Well, there are various ways to privatize, no? Or what they're referring to, which we suppose is a partnership or a PPP with the private sector. And one very important thing that only the government can address are things like franchises, issuance of franchises, updating of franchises. How do you prioritize? If you are going to, for instance, give metrics to a private company that they have to have a headway, for instance, of 15 minutes, which means that a bus is coming every 15 minutes. Buses have to be able to complete X number of rounds throughout the day. Things like prioritization on road, allocation of more lanes for public transportation. These are things that only the government will be able to answer. And that's the role of perhaps MMDA, DPWH, and all that. The private companies, on the other hand, can answer by way of operating, which is kind of already what's happening anyway already. Private companies are the ones that are running the buses on EDSA. But there's a lot of things that can be improved and must be improved. And hopefully, the study that they've commissioned or that they will commission would unpack all of these and identify all of these issues.
Okay, of course, at the root of all of these, of course, is commuter welfare. But mostly when we're talking about privatization, the immediate concern would be added cost for commuters. So is this going to be a point of concern here? And how do you think this probable partnership between the government and the private sector should at least address this particular concern?
Okay, it's a very tricky issue, because we have been calling for what we call service contracting. And that is not in any way entirely about libreng sakay. What this means is that the government needs to be able to, so obviously on the side of the passengers, there's affordability of public transportation. And on the other hand, there's profitability of operators. And in order for you to satisfy those requirements, the government has to step in by subsidizing in order to meet affordability and profitability, which means that operators must be able to operate without it at a profit, but at the same time, the commuters should be able to afford reasonably public transportation. And that's where government has to come in. And this doesn't necessarily have to come in the form of libreng sakay, but by service contracting or subsidizing that portion that satisfies those two conditions.
Have you seen use cases wherein privatization has made commuting more efficient and maybe cheaper?
We can look at the experience of, for instance, a more advanced economies like Singapore, where the government provides for the units or the buses, and it's the private sector that operates it. So there are models by which we can make this work, at which privatization or a public-private partnership can work. But what's very important is that the metrics that they use would take into consideration the welfare of the commuters, so that, as Secretary Bautista has mentioned, pag nag-iintay sila, hindi sila mainitan or hindi sila nauulanan. Those are things, or so that there will be a public transport option available at any given time of the day and at any given location in the country. So there are a lot of use cases around the country. The nearest to us is Singapore. In fact, if you look at their story and how they began rehabilitating their public transportation, they look it looks pretty much like where we are today. And within a span of maybe less than 10 years, they were able to bring it to a certain level that they already benefit from today.
All right. Well, that would be a wonderful thing.
That's dope.
All right. So thank you so much for your
It is.
time. Alt Mobility PH Director Ira Cruz. Thank you so much. Now, after the break, the government plans to revise the SRP for onions as prices of the commodities shoot up. Bureau of Plant Industry spokesperson Diego Rojas will also join us for a discussion, that and more, when the big story returns. Keep it here on One News. You're watching the big story here on One News. Now, prices of onions in some wet markets have doubled and are now more expensive than meat. Camille Samonte with this report.
Marilu, a vendor, sets aside 10,000 pesos in budget to buy 10 kilograms of onions. But because of the high prices of onions, she is now considering selling other vegetables in the meantime.
Wala kaming order ngayon yan kasi sa sobrang mahal. Kahapon pa namin na sibuyas yan. Kasi pag mag-order kami ng ganon, magkano ang puhunan?
Vendors are now struggling to keep afloat as onions become more and more expensive. In Metro Manila, onions are selling for 460 to 600 pesos per kilo. Some small stores are even selling for as much as 750 pesos per kilo, making onions more expensive than beef at 420 pesos per kilo and pork at 370 pesos per kilo. For 1 kilo of onion, you can already buy 2 kilos of chicken for 400 pesos. Some consumers like Aling Baby prefer buying onions that are nearly rotten just to save up. These are being sold for 380 pesos per kilo at the Mega Q Mart.
Para nakamura ako kasi doon sobrang mahal. Kaya dito pagtiyagaan ko na lang.
Magkano daw yan?
300. So ang laki ng diferensya, di ba? Sobrang hirap. Budget talaga. Kasi kita mo 300 ito, bulok-bulok na, di ba? Wala, pagtiyagaan na lang.
Despite skyrocketing prices, the Agriculture Department is still not keen on importing onions. The DA is hopeful, though, that onion prices will start to go down by 2023. For now, there are proposals to set the suggested retail price of red onions at 250 pesos a kilo. But until that gets approved, consumers have no choice but to bear the brunt and hold their tears back as they shop for pricier onions. For News 5, Camille Samonte, we are One News.
Now here to talk to us about the soaring prices of onions is Bureau of Plant Industry spokesman Diego Rojas. Good evening, Diego. Welcome to the big story. 600 pesos and more. Bakit ganun? Ano ba nangyari? Why that expensive? Is it an isolated case? May problema ba talaga when it comes to supply, or are we still dealing with fertilizer problems here?
Fertilizer problem, that's one, no? But the cost of expensive onions kasi is mostly on the demand, no? Holiday po ngayon, sunod-sunod ang Christmas party, Noche Buena. So, demand talaga is significantly high. And also, yung supply po natin, medyo may shortage. That is because noong mga nakaraang buwan, sunod-sunod po yung bagyo, nagkaroon din po nung damages, no? So, yung actual yield po natin is lower than expected. Kaya po tumaas yung presyo ng sibuyas.
Okay, sir. So, domestic problem po ito. Hindi po siya global phenomenon na mahal lang talaga yung onions. And if so, ano po yung dapat na price? What are the prices po ngayon sa farm gate?
Well, based po dun sa discussion ng yung discussion kanina, no? It should be around 250 pesos. But again, DA is still assessing kung 250 talaga. If I'm not mistaken, parang gumagawa na po sila ng cost structure to assess talaga kung ano na yung prevailing costs of production pagdating po sa red and yellow onion. So, ang pinaka-cost talaga nito is overall, nagtaas talaga ang cost of production natin.
Wait, give us an idea. There's a price difference between red and white onion. Tama, like what you mentioned earlier.
Yes.
And gaano kalaki yung diferensya? And if that's the case, bakit mas mura yung white onion compared sa red?
Ay sir, I'd have to correct you with that, no? Kasi right now, wala po tayong supply ng white onion. And yung harvest po nun is sa January pa. And ideally po, mas mababa ang price ng red onion kasi yun po yung mas pinoproduce ng mga farmers versus yung white onion.
Okay. So, wait, bakit tayo walang supply, ng white onion again?
At the moment po kasi, hindi po tayo nag-i-import ng white onion.
Right.
We also don't want to inundate yung market ng onion. And yun nga, mas tinatanim po yung red onion. Although, based naman po sa monitoring namin, come January and February, magkakaroon naman po tayo ng supply.
Okay, so temporary issue po siya. Sir, historically ba, nag-i-import talaga tayo ng onions? And is there a need to import at the moment since the prices are like this? Or antayin na lang natin na bababa naman siya?
Historically, we have imported and it didn't go well kasi na-inundate nga yung market with onions. That is what we want to avoid this time. And the need to import at the moment po kasi, we expect a supply this January. So ayaw naman po natin na pagsabayin yung pag-harvest ng ating farmers tapos papasok din po yung import. And based naman po dun sa monitoring namin, yung expected harvest po will be enough for our demand in the coming month. So hopefully po pag bumaba na yung presyo ng sibuyas, no, hindi na po natin kakailanganin na mag-import.
Okay, so once the supply comes in by January, how much of an improvement should we be expecting in terms of price point?
Right now po, we are yet to establish that. Pero based nga po dun sa previous discussion, we could see around 250 per kilo or much better. Again, depende, supply and demand po siya.
Okay.
So, since January din naman po, expected din po nagbababa ang demand. Kaya, since bababa ang demand, tataas ang supply, we could expect na mas maganda po yung magiging prices po ng onions. Magna-normalize na po siya, hopefully.
Useful pa po ba yung proposal to raise the SRP, no? 170 to 250 pesos kung sa ngayon between 500 to 700 pesos naman po siya per kilo?
Well, useful po siya. It's based on a stakeholders meeting naman po. It's not yet final. Agreement pa lang naman siya. Pero let's just wait na lang po yung official announcements or positions po nung sa central office. Kung ano po yung magiging final agreement on the pricing of onion.
Alright, anyway, it's January by next week. So sana dumating na yung
Yes
supply
po.
soon
Sana po talaga.
soonest time
Tiisin
possible.
muna ang walang onion for a few,
Medyo iwas-iwas
few
muna sa
months.
paggisa for New Year. Thank you very much for your time tonight again, Sir Diego Rojas, spokesperson of the Bureau of Plant Industry. Now, let's pause for a quick break. Right after that, residents in Misamis Oriental are left with damaged houses and livelihood following the massive flooding over the weekend. That and more when the big story returns. Keep it here on One News. We're still watching the big story here on One News. Some residents in the town of Clarin in Misamis Oriental will have to spend New Year's in evacuation centers that's after their homes were destroyed due to the Christmas Day floods. Gemma Bansenya with the story.
What was supposed to be a joyful New Year turned sorrowful for the Dampas family. In a span of few days, the family lost their home as well as a loved one. They were supposed to have a happy Christmas Eve, but the floods came and swept their place. They tried to save each other, but 20-year-old Mark Lester was quickly carried away by the water.
Pero ang akong manghod, ug ang akong magulang,
Sabi niya, inanod ng baha ang dalawa niyang kapatid. Napakalakas daw ng impact ng tubig. After the flood subsided, they found Mark Lester dead few meters away from their house. According to the residents, their dike couldn't handle the strength of the flood from the nearby river. Because of this, the water overflowed and reached the road. The result, residents are having a difficult time getting through. In order to cross, some even had to use a rope. For motorcycles, there are those who will help with crossing, but for a fee of 100 pesos. It's dangerous because motorcycles can be swept away by the river, just like what happened to Alan's jeep.
Pagka dakugid sa tubig,
Sabi niya, bandang alas 12, napakalakas na raw talaga ng tubig kaya inanod na ang sasakyan niya. Even if the flood subsides, there are still problems in some places given the lack of water, electricity, and signal supply. That's why neighboring provinces such as Zamboanga del Sur, Cagayan de Oro, including the DOH Region 10, the BFP, Coast Guard, PNP, and other agencies have sent additional responders and rescue vehicles. According to the NDRRMC, 16 people died in Northern Mindanao due to flash floods and landslides over the weekend. Most of the casualties are in the province of Misamis Oriental. Residents are now appealing for help as they need water, food, hygiene kits, and materials to build temporary shelters. For News 5, Jem Avancenia, we are One News.
Meanwhile, Pag-asa says the low-pressure area inside the Philippine area of responsibility may stir rains over areas still reeling from the Christmas Day floods. Now at 10 a.m. earlier today, the LPA was last spotted some 260 kilometers east-northeast of Hinatuan, Surigao del Sur. Pag-asa said it is not ruling out the possibility of the weather disturbance developing into a tropical depression in the next few days. The LPA is expected to bring moderate to heavy rains over in eastern Visayas, Caraga, Northern Mindanao, the Zamboanga Peninsula, Bicol, and Palawan. Residents are warned of possible flooding and landslides in these areas.
Some of the country's brightest stars grace the 2022 Metro Manila Film Festival in style as the 48th edition of the MMFF recognized the best talents out of all the 8 film entries.
DOTr, the only horror movie among this year's entries, topped the competition by taking home 8 accolades, including the coveted Best Picture. MJ Marfori with all the details.
True to this year's theme, Balik Saya, celebrities and other attendees were all smiles at the 48th Metro Manila Film Festival, Gabi ng Parangal. Everyone arrived in style, like Bibi Gandang Hari, who stepped out of a sports car in her royal blue, tight-fit gown. She's back in the country after 7 years.
Did you miss this, Bibi?
Yeah, so much. Can't you see in my face? Alam mo naman, ano tayo sa Amerika, simpleng tao tayo sa Amerika. So, this is like new to me again.
Looking like an award statue is Nadine Lustre in her gold ensemble with a DOTr face tattoo across her nose. She won Star of the Night and Best Actress for her performance in the film. DOTr also won Best Picture, Best Director for Mikhail Red, and Best Cinematography, among others. And as per unofficial results, the thriller film is #1 in the box office as of the moment.
To me naman, kasi it doesn't really matter if you're #1, 2, or 3, or 4, 5, whatever. As long as everyone's enjoying the film, that's the only thing that matters to me.
The Best Actor award went to male star of the night, Ian Veneracion, while Mon Confiado won Best Supporting Actor for Nananahimik ang Gabi, which was named 3rd Best Picture.
And we're just happy that it seems like people are back in the cinemas now. And masaya kami na marami na ulit na nanonood sa totoong theaters.
Mama Sapano was awarded 2nd Best Picture along with Best Screenplay and other awards. Dimples Romana took home the Best Supporting Actress trophy for her role in My Father, Myself, while Sean Gabriel won Best Child Performer. Notably absent were the headliners for the cinema entries Love You with an Accent and Partners in Crime. Instead of attending, Vice Ganda visited fans at cinemas in Tarlac and Pampanga. Moviegoers can still catch the MMFF entries until January 7, 2023. For News 5, MJ Marfori, we are One News.
All right, congratulations to the winners. But more than anything, congratulations to the local film industry. I mean, the fact that they were able to go back to the cinemas and then the warm reception here from the audience.
3 years.
Tagal nun, di ba?
And then award ceremony pa. So 7 days left, tama ba? No.
7 days to the whole festival.
Okay, until January 7 pa.
I think
we still
may
have some
entries pa
time
dyan extended.
after the big story, Jess, to watch
Pagod na ako. So, some other day.
Last full show.
And that's the big story tonight. For more updates, follow News 5, the Philippine Star, and Business World online. You may also log on to onenews.ph for more in-depth analysis. I'm Jess De Los Santos.
The big story is also available via our Signal Play app. Make a free account now. That's at signalplay.com and stream One News anytime, anywhere. I'm Dani Laurel. Stay safe, Philippines. We're down to our last 4 days before 2023. 4 ba?
We are One News, all sides, all the time.